Well, hello scrappers, Mike here. Welcome back to my channel. What do we got going on today? Well, today we've got the toaster oven back out and some boards, so we're going to do some board depopulating again. And while we're doing it, I'm going to answer some questions, because I've been getting a lot of questions lately about the hows, whys, and wherefores of depopulating boards and sorting the components that you get off of boards. And some other questions too that I think we can answer while I'm working. I think instead of just sitting down in front of the camera like I've done in the past with my question and answer videos, I'll work and get something productive done while I answer your questions. And maybe you'll learn something along the way too. So let me get started populating some boards, and I'll talk about the questions I've been getting and my take on the answers to them, okay? Okay, I got the toaster oven heating up. So I like to have it hot before I get started. Now, for those of you who are new to my channel or just haven't seen my videos where I depopulate boards in a toaster oven, I got this toaster oven cheap at Goodwill for like $6.95. Okay, $6.95. They even let you test it in the store and make sure it works. It came with racks and all kinds of stuff. So I have it set on broil. I have it set on the highest temperature setting. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put boards in here on the top rack and let the heat from the elements up there melt the solder so that the parts will come off. I'm going to depopulate boards. Now this brings up the first question. And I've got this a couple times recently. And basically the question is, why depopulate boards? What is the point of that? People have suggested, why don't you just run these things through like a hammer mill or something and completely chip them up and then deal with the results of that rather than depopulating them? Well, I'm going to tell you why that's a bad idea. So let's take a look at a board like this. So this board has a lot of good stuff on it. Obviously, it's got these gold fingers down here, which you can see. Okay. It's got a lot of IC chips on it. And you know me, I love IC chips because they contain a lot of gold. It's got up here, it's got connectors with gold-plated pins. It's got gold-plated pins over here. So this board has a lot of good stuff on it. But there's a lot of stuff on it that's not worth anything, too. Or at least not worth much. There's a lot of plastic here. There's a lot of steel. There's a lot of copper. There's a lot of epoxy and ceramic. And what you've got is you've got a lot of high-grade stuff like the IC chips, the fingers, the pins. And you've got a lot of low-grade stuff like the glass fiber that the board's made of, the steel, the epoxy, the plastic, the ceramic. That's all low-grade stuff. The copper, even, I consider it a low-grade stuff, although copper is quite valuable. It's hard to separate from the rest of this, okay? There's tin here. There's all kinds of stuff. Now, if you depopulate a board, you can cherry-pick what you take off of here. You can high-grade the board. You can take the high-grade stuff like the fingers. You take the high-grade stuff like the IC chips. You can take the high-grade stuff like the gold-plated pins. But if you were to run this board through a hammer mill and then try to separate out the high-grade stuff from the low-grade and worthless stuff, now you've got a problem. That is not easy to do at all. Jason over at MBMM has tried this. He has run boards through his hammer mill and gotten them pulverized down into fine powder, basically. Now, he's tried separating some of the worthless stuff out of it on his shaker tables. He's run them across his shaker tables and gotten rid of the plastic and other lightweight stuff, but then he winds up with a mix of metals. The gold, the silver, the platinum are in there somewhere, but they're now, instead of being high grade, they're mixed in with tons of copper and aluminum and steel and zinc and tin. And what you wind up doing is you take high-grade stuff and you turn it into low-grade material that's really hard to separate the values out of. And getting the values back out of that, Jason has tried hard. And I have some of his material. A friend of mine sent a bunch of circuit boards to Jason, had them crushed up, had them run across his shaker table. And he sent me, the results of that, the mixed metals. And I spent years myself trying to find an economical and reasonably easy way to get the valuable metals out of that now low grade material. And, I failed, Jason's failed. It's really not a good way to go. What you want to do is you want to take a board like this, or these other boards down here, and you want to high grade it. You want to take off the high grade material as best you can. I mean, some of these IC chips, they're going to pop right out, okay? With a screwdriver, not a problem. We pop them out, right. Okay, that's good. We'll pop them out. What doesn't come out easy, we take off with other ways. Like I can get the fingers off. I can cut them off with snippers like this, or, let me zoom out a little bit so you can see what I'm doing, or I'll just break them off with a pair of pliers here, like so. Just break them off. That's quicker. Okay, so we'll get the chips, we'll get the fingers. Everything that's soldered into the board, we need to depopulate that we want, okay? So we'll run this through, my depopulation process. I have, the toaster oven over here for medium-sized boards. For very large boards, I tend to run them through one of my kilns, heat the kiln up above the temperature of melting solder, and let the board sit in there for a while, then just shake it, and everything falls off pretty much. For small boards like ramstick boards, I have a George Foreman rotisserie. Rest in peace, George. A George Foreman rotisserie cooker, and I put those in the basket of the cooker and let it spin, and the spinning, banging motion as the boards bang against each other in the hot rotisserie cooker knocks all the chips off the boards. So, I have, at least 3 different ways to depopulate boards. There's other ways. People can do it with an air hammer and just get everything off. That's one way to do it. There's all kinds of ways to depopulate boards. So that's why we depopulate boards, to high grade them, so that we don't wind up low grading the boards by mixing the valuable stuff in too intimately with the non-valuable stuff that's here, and then it's hard to get the valuable stuff back out. So another question I get is, what's worth taking off on the boards? Okay, if you're going to depopulate the boards, what's worth taking off? Well, of course, I said, the fingers here, and I've been working here to remove the fingers on a lot of these boards. But the fingers, of course, I always call fingers the low-hanging fruit of gold recovery from e-waste, because they're just so easy to deal with. And there's multiple ways to do it. We'll look at some of those in a future video, by the way, so watch for that. What else is worth taking? Well, the IC chips. The IC chips, of course, some boards have, I don't see any right handy, but some of them have tantalum capacitors on them, which are full of silver. So those are worth taking. Some older boards will have MLCCs on them that contain palladium. Not so much on newer boards, but on older boards. If you get in older boards, check, see if the MLCCs that come off are magnetic. If they are not magnetic or only weakly magnetic, they probably contain some palladium, so they're worth keeping. Beyond that, well, it's up to individual preference. I know some people, like my friend Johnny over in Finland, he'll take everything off a board and just stockpile the different parts, even if some of the parts he's taken off have little or no value. It's just the way he is. He likes to depopulate boards completely and stockpile everything. Other people, well, they'll just take, the high grade stuff. And, like the fingers and the chips and maybe a couple of other things. And then there's people in between who try to find, a balance of value versus effort when they depopulate boards. And they won't take the really low grade stuff, but they'll take stuff, the high grade, the medium grade, mid grade stuff, but they won't go for the really low grade stuff. So, it's an individual preference. It's how much work you want to put into it versus the return you're expecting to get. from what you're saving. Okay, so let's get a few boards in the oven and get them cooking. Okay, I think I've got enough that I've got the fingers off of. Let me pull a few IC chips off of these. I'll do that off camera. The socketed ones, and then we'll get some of these boards in the oven and start depopulating, and we'll talk about some of the other questions I get. Okay, the oven's had plenty of time to heat up. I can feel the heat coming off of it. In fact, I put boards up on top of it here to start preheating them up on top, just to sort of speed up the process. Now, I'm going to put a few of these boards in. Now, we got several different types of components on this board. This has got surface mount parts, and if I put the board in like this, those surface mount parts are going to get radiant heat coming down on them from the heating elements on top, and the solder holding them in is going to melt, and they will fall right out. Now, to get the through-hole parts, of which there are quite a few on here as well, I'll have to flip the board over, so the solder on the back side of the board heats up. But that's okay. We'll run them through both ways. We'll run them through face up first, get the parts off. We'll run them through face down again to get the through-hole parts off. Easy peasy. It works both ways. So while we're waiting for this first batch of boards to heat up, and it's going fast, I can smell warm electronics already coming out of this thing. We'll talk a little bit more about value of parts, okay? So there's value in a couple of different ways, all right? You've got your scrap value, where, you pull the parts off and you can either resell them to a scrap dealer, or you can process them to get the gold out of them, okay? Gold, silver, platinum, palladium, whatever. So that's your scrap value. You can do that. Now, there's also other possibilities. Before you scrap out a board, you need to double check and see if there's a demand for this board, if people want to buy it, especially if you know the boards are good. A lot of the boards I get, I know are good. They come out of working equipment that's been scrapped. So I know the boards are good. I always look to see if there's any real resale value to them. And everything we're scrapping today, no resale value. The boards are either bad, or I know they're good, but I've looked them up and they have no resale value. Now, beyond that, some of the components on the boards may have some value to them. If you know me, you know I have a lot of hobbies, and one of them is retro electronics and vintage computing. So a lot of times I will take some of the components off these boards for my own use, my own personal use in my other hobbies. And since I'm a member of those communities and people know I have parts, sometimes they will want to buy some of these parts from me. And I have the ability, I have the equipment to test the parts and make sure they're good before I try to use them, or before I sell them to somebody else. So there's another way to get value out of your parts. There's a lot of different ways to get value out of scrap. It's not all just about, getting the gold and silver out. There's lots of other ways to make a buck off your scrap. Okay, I think the first batch of boards is probably done. Let me put this back up in the preheat spot. We'll pull these out and get the parts off of them. At least as many as will come off. Don't forget your gloves, because these are going to be hot for sure. Let's see what'll come off. Whoa, pretty much everything came off. Look at that. That is a clean board. Pretty much everything came right off. All right, let's try this one. Oh yeah, stuff's just fallen right off of the board, including a lot of the through-hole parts. Most of the through-hole parts actually came off. So I'm going to flip it over and put it back in and see if we can get some more of those through-hole parts to come off. But yeah, see how quick and easy that is? Find that. There we go. Look at that. Even the big connector on the back of the one board came off. Quick, easy peasy. All right. Now, are we done? Have we got all the value off the board? Well, no. This board still has value. A lot of scrap yards, at least near me that I know of, will buy this board. You're not going to pay a lot for it because you've taken all the components off, but it still contains copper. It contains tin, and they'll sell it to one of the big recyclers who can crush this stuff up and separate the copper, the tin, the whatnot from the glass fiber and the epoxy that's in this board. So, there's still value here. So there's another way to make a buck off of your boards, your electronic scrap, after you've harvested all the parts off of it. One more thing. It's like Inspector Columbo. One more thing. You might be asking yourself, why are you bothering to take the fingers off the boards before they go in the oven? What is the point of that? Well, not only am I taking the fingers off before they go in the oven, you'll notice I'm putting them in a different container than I put all the hot stuff that comes off the boards when they come out of the oven. And I'm doing this to keep from getting melted solder all over the lovely gold fingers. I don't want that. I don't want the fingers entombed in melted solder because that makes it more difficult to recover the gold from them. So, just in case you were wondering about that. Okay, I'm going back to doing some production here, and then we'll talk about sorting. Okay, we're almost done. The last two boards I want to do today are in here, but something has come up that I want to show you. I hope you can see it. Let me try and get a little better focus on it. This board, the traces on it are gold plated. So this board we're going to keep because it is covered in gold plating. All of the traces on it are gold plated. But this brings up another question, which I got recently, and I forget who it was from. Forgive me. But basically his question was, aren't all boards gold plated underneath the solder mask? So you've got this green solder mask over the traces under there. And he's like, aren't they all just gold plated under the solder mask? Shouldn't we just be stripping the solder mask off all our boards and keeping them for the gold plating? And the answer is a big no. Most of the boards you'll come across, the traces are not gold plated. Very few are. It's been my experience that you can usually tell pretty easily looking at the board in the places where the traces are exposed, where components are soldered on. On this board, you could tell those traces are gold plated. Yes, they are. This board, you can tell they are not. Now, there are some boards, like this one, where they are gold plated. And in my experience, if you have a board with black solder mask, don't know why they prefer black, but if a board has black solder mask on it, odds are pretty good the traces underneath are gold plated. But you can usually tell just by looking whether they're gold plated or not. And none of these boards I've done, other than this one, have gold plated traces. Although this one does have a fair amount of extra gold plating on it in places. So again, this is what I would save to try and get the gold plating off. Okay? But most of the rest of these boards have little to no gold plating on them at all. And I think you'll find that most of the boards you're going to process will have little to no gold plating on them at all. Just a few outliers you'll find will have it. So no, not every board. You don't want to waste your time trying to strip the solder mask off of every board that comes through your hands. That's a lot of time, effort, and chemicals that's going to be wasted for nothing. Just look at the boards close, scratch away the solder mask in places if you're not sure, and you'll know real quick whether that board's gold plated or not. All right, we've got all the boards we're going to do today through the oven. All the parts are off. Everything's cooled down. I put the oven away. So it's time to start sorting. And while I do it, we're going to talk about the hows, whys, and wherefores of sorting. Okay? First thing we need to do, dump this stuff out on a flat surface, find a comfy chair, sit down, and start sorting it into piles. Okay? And the first thing I'm going to take out, I have a bag here of fingers. First thing I'm going to take out is the fingers, and I'm going to put them in this bag. In a future video, not too far down the road, we're going to get back to my series on doing e-waste with easy to find inexpensive chemicals, and the first thing we'll work on is fingers. So I'm going to collect all the fingers out of here, put them in this bag so we've got something to work on in that video. So fingers first. We get these all out and we will move on to other stuff. Okay, there's probably a few more hiding in here, but we'll find them as we go. All right. Next, IC chips. I'm just going to pull them out and set them into piles. Now, we got multiple kinds of IC chips here. This is a Gold Corner BGA. I love Gold Corner BGAs because they have a lot of gold in them, okay? Now, these other chips, well, they have a fair amount of gold too, but they're not as easy to process and they don't contain as much as the Gold Corner BGA. So I'm going to sort the chips into a couple of different piles based on what type they are, how much gold they have, and how easy they are to process, and what sort of process they have to go through, okay? So Gold Corner BGAs in one place, these big flat packs over here. There's a ceramic chip or two in here. Ceramics get their own pile because they get dealt with differently. We got dual inline chips. I'm going to put them with the flat pack chips over here. Here's another Gold Corner BGA. We got these kind of BGA chips right here, which really have no value. There's next to no precious metals in them. I'm going to start trash pile off to the side here, and I'm going to put those in there. We got a couple of heat sinks here, which are just in the way. These came off of a couple of these Gold Corner BGAs on some video cards I ran through. So I'm going to set these heat sinks off to the side. They are extruded aluminum. They're worth money. I just took a truckload of extruded aluminum to the scrapyard the other day, and I made a pretty penny on it. So this will go into my next extruded aluminum pile. So more chips coming out. Most of these chips are going to go into the flat pack and dual inline pack pile over here. Here's another Gold Corner BGA. Here's another scrap worthless BGA. Gold Corner BGA. And so forth. And so on. So why am I sorting the chips like this? Well, all of these plastic chips, the flat packs, the dual inlines, I process them all the same way. So I'm going to put them all in the same pile over here. So that's why. Now you got some things that look like IC chips, but are not. And you get to recognize them after a while. This has little transformer coils in it for Ethernet connections. It's called a magnetic. That has no value. So that's going on a trash pile. Again, you'll get to recognize these over time. Here's another one. But let me pull the rest of the IC chips out and pile them up over here. So once I get them all sorted out, we'll talk a little bit about them. All right, I have sorted out most of the IC chips. There's still a few little tiny ones in here, but there's so much other stuff here, it's hard to see them. So I'm going to work on getting some of the other stuff out of here, some of this big stuff, and then I'll be able to pick out these little tiny IC chips in here and add them to my plastic IC chip pile over here. Now I've got my Gold Corner BGA pile over here, my plastic IC chip pile over here. This is garbage made up of magnetics and the BGA chips with no value. Ceramic IC, heat sink, and of course my fingers. So that's what's been sorted so far. Let's take a look at this pile. The elephants in the room here, we'll go through these first. So this is what's called a vacuum fluorescent display. Basically, it's kind of like a neon sign, is the way it works. It's filled with low pressure gas. You put high voltage across some of these pins, and the little dots inside light up, and you can make different patterns with them, letters, numbers, whatever. Basically, As far as I know, these have zero value. Okay, I don't see any precious metals in them. If there's gold inside there, there's darn little of it, and nothing on the outside. It's basically glass and, well, metal. So I'm going to put that in the garbage pile. Can't reuse it, can't resell it, contains no precious metals. And then we've got these connectors that came off the back of some of these boards. And I don't know if you can see the gold in there. These have a significant amount of gold in them. Now they're still attached to these mounting rails for the boards, so I'd have to take them off. But that's easy enough to do. And I will take them off in the future and put them in my big box of connectors. Here we have a video connector from the back of one of the video boards. There is a little bit of gold in here, but there is so much other stuff. There's so much plastic, metal, whatnot in these type of connectors that the amount of gold in there, as far as I'm concerned, is not worth going after. It's hard to get out, and it's just mixed in with so much other stuff. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to throw it on the garbage pile. There's some IC sockets in here. The chips that were in these sockets are now in this pile. These sockets are not gold-plated. Well, I take it back. This socket is gold-plated, so I'm going to put that with my other connectors. Yeah, that one is too. Okay, so double check whether your sockets are gold-plated before you throw them out. If they aren't gold-plated, just pitch them. We've got some other connectors here. Again, there's gold plating in these, so I'm going to put them over here with these other connectors. And I can see the gold plating from here. I don't even have to look close. Yeah. So these all have, yeah, look at the gold plating on that. That's all going in the gold plating pile. Oops, there's another gold corner BGA. Here's a connector with easily 100, 150 little gold plated pins on it. That's going over here. These RJ45 connectors for Ethernet. Each of these has 8 little gold plated wires in it. So we'll take these, put them in the connector pile. Here's some gold plated pins. Here's some more. And so on. I see anything else with gold plating? That one and that one have gold plating. Okay. At this socket, no gold plating. That's garbage. All right. There's a couple of torids in here. These are basically inductors. Got a transistor stuck to that one. So these are basically inductors. A piece of ferrite with copper windings around them. You can pull copper off if you want. It's pretty heavy copper. Otherwise, they have no real value. Battery holder, since it's not gold plated, it has no value. We'll throw it out. A little buzzer, no value. We'll throw it out. But then we're getting down to it. I mean, I can see more IC chips in here. I can start pulling them out and putting them on my IC chip pile as the amount of debris here is getting smaller. So why am I doing this? I promised to tell you why I'm sorting it out into all these different piles. Well, clearly, some of this stuff has more value than others. I mean, this stuff back here has no value, all right? IC chips, they have pretty good value. Aluminum has value. Gold corner BGAs have a lot of value. The gold-plated connectors have value, but they have different value, okay? And it's harder to get the gold out of some of this stuff than others. I mean, the fingers are probably the easiest thing to recover the gold from. Then the heat sinks, well, they can go straight to the scrapyard with no processing at all. Gold corner BGA is pretty easy to deal with. IC chips in bulk are pretty easy to deal with. But you don't want to mix them together. So somebody asked me, which was another reason for doing this video, somebody asked me, why don't you combine all the good stuff you've taken off the boards together, just grind it up and treat it at once? Well, you've got the same problem you had with grinding up a board and treating it all at once. You're going to mix a lot of good stuff with a lot of not good stuff. You're going to mix the good stuff with the garbage, and there's still a lot of garbage over here, and you're going to make it hard to pull the good stuff out. Yes, you're going to have less debris to deal with than if you did the whole board, but still, you're taking high-grade stuff here, and you're mixing it with low-grade stuff, and you're just degrading the whole thing. You're making it all low-grade, basically. Whereas doing it this way, we're still high-grading. We're concentrating our value into different piles. And of course, the different piles get treated differently. Like I process these a little different than I process these. I process these a lot different than I process these. These, of course, get processed very differently. These get processed very differently. These don't need any processing. They go straight to the scrapyard. So yeah, there's reasons for sorting it out like this. And there's other components in here too. I'm starting to see, as we get through the pile here, we've got lots of tantalum capacitors in here. So the tantalum capacitors can come out and they get processed differently than the other stuff, and they are absolutely full of silver. I have a few videos on processing tantalum capacitors. I can put a link to one in the upper right. Check that out. So yeah, that's why we sort, to preserve and enhance the value of the stuff we're getting off the boards. Here's transistors. We've got a lot of transistors in here. Okay. I process the transistors similar to how I process IC chips, but not exactly the same. So we'll start a separate pile for transistors. Um, here's some, let's see, here's some little quartz crystals. All right, and quartz crystals contain some silver. Um, I don't process them the way I process anything else here, so they get their own pile. Uh, and then there's a lot of trash here, just general trash. That, you know, once I pull out everything that I think has any value, the rest of it's going straight in the garbage. Yeah, so here's another transistor. Here's another quartz crystal. Let's see, that connector has no gold in it. It's scrap. These big electrolytic capacitors that did not explode in the oven, there's their garbage. They can get thrown away. This is another inductor. So that's basically a ferret with a coil of wire in it. Again, no real value to it. Oh, here's another gold-plated connector. And now I can see all the little ICs and the little transistors here. I can start sorting them out into their various piles. And like I say, you can go with this as far and as deep as you're comfortable with. You know, at some point you can just scrape the rest of this stuff off into the garbage can and forget about it. If you want to be, you know, really, really thorough about it, you can sort it out into every conceivable, you know, group. Some of which, to be quite frank, are not going to have any value at all. So, you know, you're just wasting your time. But you can do it if you want to. Let's see, that's a tantalum capacitor. But the sorting, so a lot of people see it as, you know, unnecessary or difficult or time consuming. But what you're doing is you're adding value here. You are adding value. Here's an LED. I always throw my LEDs in with my IC chips and process them with the IC chips. There are some resistor networks here. I'm going to set these resistor networks aside because I personally do not know whether there's any value in them or not. Different sources say different things. So I'm going to set these aside until I have enough of them that we can process a batch and test them to see if there are any precious metals in them that are recoverable. So I'm just going to accumulate these. I'll run a test in the future. I'll film it and show you. And if there aren't any precious metals in them, I will stop collecting them. If there are, I'll make sure I collect them all in the future. You know, and we're getting down to it here. There's a few more tantalum capacitors in here, and a few more tiny IC chips, and a few more transistors, and pretty much that's it. Here's another connector, but I don't see any gold in it, so that's garbage. So, yeah, let me finish this up, and we'll talk a little bit more. Okay, so I'm done sorting. At some point, when you're sorting through all this little tiny stuff, I mean, and there's still some valuable stuff in here, but not much. I mean, there's little tiny IC chips, and I probably missed a few little tiny tantalum capacitors. There's MLCCs here, but I think the boards I processed are all too new for any of these to really contain much palladium, if any. So I'm not even going to bother with trying to pull all those hundreds of tiny MLCCs out of there. You know I've got 99% of the value out of this stuff. The rest of it, I'm just going to scrape it right into my trash bin here, okay? But, you know, different strokes for different folks. If you want to continue sorting this stuff out, more power to you. You can do that. Me, I got better things to do. Like I said, I've got 99% of the value here. So that's good enough for me. So my different piles are, you know, my tantalum capacitors, my gold-plated connectors, my gold fingers. Only one ceramic chip out of all these. A fair number here of gold corner BGAs, which is nice. A lot of plastic chips. Actually, that's garbage. A lot of plastic IC chips here, which is nice. Some aluminum heat sinks, some quartz crystals, a bunch of transistors, and a bunch of resistor networks that I'm keeping on speculation. I don't know if they have value or not. The rest of it going in the garbage. Okay, a final word about maximizing your value from this stuff. Naturally, most of this stuff is just going to be processed for its gold and silver content, except for these, which are going straight to the scrapyard in my next aluminum run. But I did talk about how IC chips can have other value for me. Like, you know, I'm an electronic engineer, and I've been dealing with this kind of stuff for my entire life. I can look at this chip right here, and I can tell by the look of it that this is a 128K by 8 static RAM chip, okay? Useful to me for my projects? Yes, it would be. Resellable? Possibly. Yes, it would be if it works. And I have the ability to test these. Problem is, after doing the scrapping for years, I have a good stockpile of these already. So I'm not going to keep it. This is an EEPROM chip. And I believe this is a, let's see here, what is it? I can't tell. I need to take the label off. But I was going to do that anyway. So we'll have a look at what's under the label here. So this is a 128K by 8 EEPROM chip. Now I knew by how new this chip was that it was probably not going to have gold brazing or gold bond wires in it. You get that in the older EEPROM chips. So this really doesn't have much value to me. I don't really have a use for it. I might be able to resell it, especially if I, you know, clean the stickum off of it and erase it and make sure it works good. And collect a bunch of them. I could make a tube of them and resell them, but I'm not sure it's worth the effort. I might just throw that out. I looked at the chips on the boards before I depopulated them, and I did not really see any chips on any of the boards that were going to be of any use to me. So all these chips are going to go into my IC chip bucket for processing. Yeah, my 5-gallon bucket here of IC chips is about half full. I need to add to it a little bit. I'm going to depopulate some more boards here in the not too distant future, including some big ones that won't fit in the toaster oven. I'll have to get the kiln going. These are going to get set aside because I processed them a little bit different than these. Transistors, I've got a jar of transistors. Okay, so they'll go in the jar of transistors. And I've got a couple bags of transistors too. Once I get a big enough collection of them, we'll do some transistor processing. We've got a couple big jars full of quartz crystals and crystal oscillators. Once they pile up big enough, maybe we'll do something with them. I will put these in my jar of tantalum capacitors, and I've done tantalum capacitors I don't know how many times. I love them because they're full of silver, and they're actually fairly easy to process. And I've got a good working process down on those. It's a little harder to get the gold out of these connectors. There's a couple of different ways to do it, and we may explore those couple of different ways in a future video. And in a future video, we will determine whether there are any precious metals in these resistor networks or not. And remember, in the not too distant future, we're going to process some fingers, and we're going to do it with easy to find and inexpensive chemicals. So subscribe to see that video and all the other videos in the future on recovering precious metals from e-waste that I'm going to put out. I hope you found this video interesting, informative, inspirational, answered your questions, whatever. If so, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot for watching this one. Bye.